I would point any critics to the words of the Ukrainians yesterday, in which they said that they feel very positive about this plan. They've been very involved. They have had direct input on the language of this plan, and that we are in direct communication and correspondence with them. Any idea, let me just finish with this, the idea that the United States of America is not engaging with both sides equally in this war to bring it to an end is a complete and total fallacy. And I saw a lot of misinformation and rumors and allegations against people in this building, such as Secretary Rubio and Special Envoy Witkoff and the President himself, that they are favoring one side over the other. That could not be further from the truth. I have watched as the President and his team have worked around the clock overnight with both sides on endless phone calls, endless meetings to try to bring this war to a close.
Ukraine has the framework developed by our teams in Geneva. That framework is on the table, and we are ready to move forward together with the United States of America, with personal engagement of President Trump, and with Europe, with leaders, and with all partners who have their strengths and capacity to help.
Ukraine has cautiously agreed to parts of the US-backed peace plan, but a key question looms over it. Does Trump's 28-point blueprint favor Kyiv or hand Moscow the bigger win? According to Axios, the proposal draws heavily from President Donald Trump's original 28-point plan, a document that would require Kyiv to accept major compromises, including the surrender of additional territory, limits on its armed forces, and a formal guarantee that Ukraine will never enter NATO. U.S. officials cited by Axios admitted the plan is not easy for Kyiv, but argued that without a deal, Ukraine risks losing even more land on the battlefield.
We're having good talks. We started with Russia. We're having some talks with Russia. Ukraine is doing well. I think they're pretty happy about it. They'd like to see it end. And we won't know for a little while, but we're making progress.
You said, what are the big
We settled 8 wars, and I thought this would be one of the easier ones because of my relationship with President Putin. But this is probably one of the more difficult ones. There's a lot of hatred.
So broadly, the Trump proposal states the following: Crimea, Luhansk, and Donetsk regions be recognized as de facto Russian land. Borders of Kherson and Zaporizhzhia, partially occupied by Russia, will be frozen. As per plan, Ukraine to withdraw from areas Russia has been unable to claim in war. Withdrawal zone to be considered a neutral, demilitarized buffer zone. Russia to relinquish other territories. It controls outside 5 regions, including Sumy. Ukraine must enshrine in constitution a commitment not to join NATO. NATO must adopt a provision that Ukraine will not be admitted in future. Ukraine army should be limited to 600,000 soldiers. Kyiv should receive short-term preferential access to European market. Russia will not invade neighboring countries, and NATO will not expand. Ukraine to relinquish any claims to hold Russia accountable for its actions on Ukrainian land. And finally, Moscow to agree that $100 billion of frozen assets would be used to rebuild Ukraine. The proposal was crafted under the direction of U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff, with input from Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Trump advisor Jared Kushner, Axios reported. Witkoff also consulted Russian envoy Kirill Dmitriev, who told the outlet that Moscow felt heard for the first time, although President Vladimir Putin has not publicly backed the plan.
What's the next step?
They're going to keep talking. They're talking to Russia now. Steve Witkoff is going over, maybe with Jared. I'm not sure about Jared going, but he's involved in the process, smart guy, and they're going to be meeting with President Putin, I believe, next week in Moscow.
After those consultations, Witkoff and Kushner met Ukrainian National Security Chief Rustem Umerov, and U.S. Army Secretary Dan Driscoll delivered the written draft to President Volodymyr Zelensky in Kyiv. Zelensky later said he was prepared to discuss the proposal directly with Trump's team, describing the document as an American vision rather than a finished offer. Behind the scenes, U.S., Ukrainian, and European negotiators met in Geneva, where EU representatives introduced a counteroffer that differed sharply from the Trump blueprint. The European version suggests territorial discussions should begin from the current line of contact and proposes a higher troop cap of 800,000 instead of the U.S. planned 600,000. The Financial Times quoted Ukraine's Deputy Foreign Minister, Sergei Kislitsa, who said recent talks produced a solid body of convergence, but stressed that several elements still require high-level decisions. Meanwhile, after the U.S. and Ukraine narrowed their disagreements over Donald Trump's peace blueprint, President Trump trimmed it to a 19-point peace plan. The revised version is now being billed by both sides as a refined peace framework. But according to the New York Post, one of the most controversial demands has been removed, a clause forcing Ukraine to hand Luhansk and Donetsk to Russia. And as expected, Moscow expressed dissatisfaction with the 19-point plan. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov told the FT that the newly introduced plan raised a whole series of issues and claimed Russia had not officially received any final proposal.
After Anchorage, when we thought these understandings had already been established, a prolonged pause followed, and now that pause has been broken by the release of this document. We have it, but only through unofficial channels. Officially, it was not formally handed over to us. But we are ready, naturally, as the President said, to discuss specific formulations, because a whole range of issues there, of course, requires clarification.
Trump himself has alternated between urging swift resolution and acknowledging that the plan remains in flux. And now he expects a revised Ukrainian draft by Thanksgiving. Despite upbeat comments from Trump officials, a senior Ukrainian source told CNN that 3 major disputes remain: whether Ukraine will cede heavily fortified areas of the Donbass, whether its military will face permanent size limits, and whether Kiev must abandon its NATO ambitions. The source warned that none of these matters are settled and that suggesting only minor details remain greatly understates the scale of disagreement.